Welcome back, everyone, from your community depressed Newcastle fan. I am your host up here in Michigan, Dylan, with my co-host Reed. We are going to recap the year essentially that was in the Champions League last year of the current format.
Group stage.
I have very mixed. Very mixed
Yeah.
feelings on the changed format. Part of me thinks it'll be a lot of fun. Part of me thinks it is a massive money grab. But we're going to dive in today to the group stage that was.
We'll talk about that in the summer.
Right.
We'll talk about that in the summer.
We got to fill some time. We'll talk about the group stage that was, though. Obviously, I am very down. Part of the reason we didn't record this yesterday, we try and record immediately after each group stage, but it was a tough result for my Geordie boys. But we'll dive right into something that does make me a little bit happier in Group A. It was a pretty, I'll say this, it was a pretty chalk winner. I don't think anybody would have guessed that anybody but Bayern was going to win this group. So it did feel inevitable, but there's a lot to talk about elsewhere. I mean, from Man United getting eliminated, from all European competition to Copenhagen being the one of the other three, if you will, that advanced to the round of 16. It was kind of a fun group. I think it was a little bit more fun than most of us probably expected, and not just because we are both thrilled to see United eliminated. But what were kind of your thoughts on this? Where are you at on this group? How much of it was a surprise? How much of it was how much? We'll get into this at the end a little bit too. But how much was a little bit of a EPL disappointment, understanding the coefficient ratings and importance of that moving forward?
So to answer that before I move on to anything else, I'm like fully in trust the process mode and right now. So like if we make Champions League next year, that's awesome. Like, of course I'll be excited. But if that fifth spot also goes to Europa next year, like it normally does, like that's also fine. We don't have the depth right now to go into the Champions League. We're similar to you guys depth wise. So I'm just here. I want us to have as good a year as possible, get everybody back healthy, and we'll see where that fifth spot ends up at the end. In this group, we knew Galatasaray was going to be an X factor because going to Galatasaray was always going to be difficult for everybody in the group. And it ended up being difficult for everybody in the group. They didn't necessarily come away with wins every time, but it threw some wrinkles in things. And I think with this one, Bayern and Man U playing in that final match day, would that end up like mattering? Would Bayern kind of have the towel thrown in? Would anybody beat Bayern to really throw a wrench in that 2-4? And Bayern only ended up drawing to Man U. So, Copenhagen obviously moving forward in the Champions League is the big surprise. I don't know if you saw, Dylan, a few weeks ago, Copenhagen kind of came out with their manifesto, such like a negative connotation word, but basically like what their club wants to be moving forward, and as it relates to the Champions League and the new format. So we can talk about that whenever we talk about the new format. However, it's so cool to see teams like this get to the knockouts. It's going to suck when they draw Arsenal, and Arsenal has on paper a bye. But
I had the over 3 minutes on that one.
Almost. I'm Bayern first and Man U fourth is, I'm going to say, a welcome surprise. I'm not going to consider a coefficient in that. I think it's funny. And with Man U, I thought about it a lot, and it's more so just like even the pundits think they're so entitled to Man U just always being first. Like, that's just not the case in this day and age. There's too much money, too many places. You have to have a club top to bottom and the money. Look at Chelsea. You can't just have the money or the prestige. You got to put it all together, top to bottom. And Man U isn't that Man U anymore, Gary Neville. So you can shut the hell up. It's Man United. No, it's not anymore. Galatasaray third. I think I probably expected them second going into the last match day, but it was a serviceable group.
Copenhagen's just a tough place to play, and that's kind of what it came down to. We saw it time and time again in this group. They played Bayern incredibly tough at home. played United really well at home, and turned around and played Galatasaray well at home. So I do think there's a little bit of home field advantage there, factoring in for Galatasaray or for Copenhagen that people expected to factor in for Galatasaray. That we kind of saw come to fruition for Copenhagen. I think for Man U, like it is. Like, yeah, you said it. Like the Gary Neville, like it's Man United. Like it's United.
It's the way he says it, like his accent with his voice. Yeah.
Like, okay, but like this is their third group exit in 8 years. It is, granted, it is their fewest UCL wins in a season ever. For years, obviously, they qualified for the UCL. So, like, I don't know. Like, I'm kind of tired of that narrative.
They only ever qualified for the UCL with Ferguson, though, and they were never going to get bounced out.
I never really like buy into that narrative that this is the reason, or this is like the absolute downfall of United. Like, I think this is kind of what United is. Like, maybe not finishing fourth in their group with a group of Galatasaray and Copenhagen as two of the other three. But this is what United is in this day and age, and I'm also kind of tired of that narrative.
Spot on.
But group exits are not like a complete anomaly for United, so I don't think it's like some complete shock that they got knocked out in the group. I think in this group in particular, it may have been a little bit of a shock, but like United just isn't the power that they used to be. I think that goes to speak, and we've talked about it time and time again about like the dispersion of riches or success, if you will, in Europe, changing so much over the last 15 to 20 years. I think this is just kind of furthering that point. Like sure, United probably should be playing Europa at minimum, but they're not, and I'm not totally surprised. Like, I think both of us had United in a Europa League spot. Neither of us had United in a Champions League
kind of just by default, 16.
Though. Right?
Like I wasn't convinced.
Right? Yeah, neither of us were like, oh, well, and that goes to our predictions. Like, neither of us were like, oh, United is going to walk into this group as you would see on paper by name and automatically qualify for the round of 16. And I think this just kind of furthers that. And we'll later tonight, maybe you guys will get this second episode tomorrow, but we'll kind of jump into Ten Hag and his future at United. And I think this is kind of going into it a little bit. And what to really
with Liverpool on the weekend,
what can you really expect from United at this point? And I think a non-guaranteed qualification for round of 16 is kind of the crux of that. Like I don't think they're any longer that team that is guaranteed to advance, and we saw that come to fruition.
Yeah. Group B. So this was Arsenal's group. It's kind of the cakewalk group of the Champions League, if you will. It's a little dicey after they lost to Lens, match week 2 or something, but I mean, it was never going to be in dire straits for them. They ended up convincingly winning this group. PSV not so convincingly moving forward, but doing so nonetheless, with a negative goal differential, 9 points, one ahead of Lens. Sevilla, like, what are you doing? You didn't even get back to Europa League, dog.
More like
at 2 points?
More like Cecilia. You're just always trying to qualify for Europa League, and like that's always your end goal is let's qualify high enough in Spain to be a guaranteed Champions League and just fall into Europa, and you can't do it this year. And much of that is kudos to Lens. I think that's kind of an unheralded story here a little bit. It's the first time they've qualified for any sort of Europa League knockout since 2000, I believe it was when I looked it up. 2000 UEFA Cup, which is now Europa. So essentially just falling back to what they did in 2000, but like it's a massive result from Lens. And PSV
absolutely
is a couple American lads. Like I'm super pumped to see them advance into Champions League, just more high level, high competition matches for our Americans, Pepe, Tillman, and Serginho. Pepe and Tillman. Tillman technically doesn't get an assist. I grew up in Michigan in the hockey culture. That should have been an assist. Very much a hockey assist, if you will. Really was the creator of their goal against Arsenal this week, and Pepe kind of getting a fluke. I don't want to say fluky because that's kind of minimalizing it, but an assist that a lot of guys could have made in that situation that was really brought to fruition by Tillman. But I'm just super excited to see 3 Americans move on. Dest had his typical Dest highlight reel that he posts on Instagram did include his nasty nutmeg and the bench going crazy over it. But overall in this group, personally, I know you're a big anti-Arsenal fan. I'm slowly becoming a big anti-Arsenal guy. But I think this is kind of the best I could have asked for. PSV advancing into the knockout stage in second place with a pretty good showing from the Americans.
Yeah.
Only losing, like they lost the same number of matches that Arsenal did. And like that is a pretty solid accomplishment. I know we're used to seeing Ajax do similar things in the Champions League as a Dutch side, but it's nice to see it kind of being headed on by a couple of Americans. So I'm super excited to see them continue. Yeah. I think they're probably the team outside of the English teams for coefficient reasons that I'm going to be following the most in the knockout stages, just obviously with that American wrinkle involved. I'm really hoping to see them succeed.
You can go... Yeah, in Arsenal, you can go far, but don't you think about going too far.
Yeah, like get to the semis, like help the coefficient out, but like don't get too big of a head. Don't be too good.
Then City, do your thing, get them out of there. Or Real Madrid, get them out of there. So speaking of Lens, I think the French teams outside of PSG are normally afterthoughts in this competition as of late. Well, you got your exceptions, Mbappe's Monaco and things like that, but it wasn't like a Marseille or one of those teams that is big and you'd like to see them back. Lens, I didn't know about Lens before this Champions League. Honestly, didn't even know they existed. They'll probably cease to exist in my mind after this year because I don't think they're doing very well in the league. I don't think they'll be back in Europe, but good for them. I am kind of happy to see Sevilla not get to merchant their way back. Win the Europa League and then get automatic qualification into next year's Champions League. But the big headline here for us, obviously, is the Americans getting through. You also have, obviously, Gio Reyna getting through with Dortmund, which we'll talk about in a second. But
I mean, it is.
Yeah, 1 and 2.
It is a pretty big story, Sevilla not getting through, though. 2 of the last 3 Europa League champions, 7-time Europa League champions. Like you said, this is kind of their MO. We've mocked it multiple times on the show in the past that like they get here with the sole intention of taking third in their group and then trying to go win Europa. So like I have nothing against Sevilla, like no personal vendetta against Sevilla, but it is kind of nice seeing that strategy kind of backfire a little bit here.
And just nice seeing La Liga not be able to, it's like, oh, La Liga won another European competition. It's like, but it's Sevilla in the Europa League. Like, come on. Group D was a pretty cool one. I mean, Real Sociedad came out and just did what I don't think we thought they would, but they were such an unknown quantity. I think seeing them be like the Walmart version of last year's Napoli is cool to see, and it's almost recognizable. Maybe the colors have something to do with it, with my 5th grade mind. So they aren't a walkover in the knockout rounds by any means. They're playing well. So
no, they're certainly
Group D,
not a walkover. But I do think if you are a seeded team
we'll have to watch January for them also. January for teams like that, who are they going to get rid of? And were you going to say that? Sorry if I took your...
Like a pot 1 team that has some money from the Isak sale. Sorry to bring it back to Newcastle again, but it is part of it. They got.
You'll have your moment,
they got
Dylan. You'll have your
$60+ million plus the Champions League winnings to go spend in January. So it is a little bit interesting. I think the biggest story.
Oh, I meant who they're going to lose. I think they've got some midfielders that have some pretty serious links.
Will they lose them this year? Will you have to pay a premium for them because they are one of those pot 1 or seeded teams? Is kind of an interesting question.
Chelsea doesn't care. Chelsea doesn't care if they'll come in and get them.
They can't just stretch stuff out over 8 years anymore. Thank you, Premier League, for finally duplicating what UEFA does. But I honestly, I think the bigger story here is Inter being a pot 2 team. I came into the season as an Inter fan of sorts, being a little worried about the summer they had and their financial issues. But it's still a team. Lautaro Martinez, Denzel Dumfries, like it's a team I would not want to have to face as a seeded team in that round of 16. Tough place to go play.
And they got that DNA, which matters. Their DNA got them to the final last year, I feel like, in many ways. And Onana.
And so did that home field advantage. So certainly not a team you want to play in that round of 16. It's probably the most feared unseeded, is what they call it, team in that draw. But also, I mean,
which pot 1 team is going to get lucky with them?
Right. Also, I want to give a quick shout out before we move on, though, to Benfica. I think a lot of people this year thought Benfica could heavily threaten for a second place in this against Sociedad. Most people probably had Inter 1 and then Sociedad or Benfica 2. Benfica has certainly struggled throughout 4 losses, even with Salzburg. But they needed a 2+ goal differential to make Europa League, and Cabral 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever it was, into stoppage time, got them their 3-1 lead over Salzburg to get them to advance into Europa League. And from like a full Europeans perspective, I know we focus more on Champions League and the Premier League and that side of things, but the ability for a Portuguese side to keep bringing in that European money is certainly massive, and vice versa for Salzburg. Not getting that European money is certainly nothing to turn your nose up at. I mean, it is not the Benfica we saw last year that was really, really threatening Champions League sides. They lost a lot in the summer, but kind of pulled through on final match day. I'll be honest, like I'm an Inter fan. I switched over my main TV to Benfica Salzburg in the last 20 minutes over Inter and Sociedad. I had that up on my computer because this game was much more entertaining. Both Inter and Sociedad kind of seem to just be toying with each other. Whatever happens type of thing. But Benfica really pushed forward to get that Europa League spot. I wouldn't say I would predict Benfica to have a Sevilla type run, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they had a Sevilla type run in Europa League, just with their familiarity with the league and the fan base and everything of that nature. Right? I think it probably makes Europa League a little bit more entertaining than if Salzburg would have advanced.
Yeah, you mentioned it, but you have to keep in mind Benfica sold over like $200 million worth of players, worth of goals, worth of midfielders.
Their star striker.
So to be in that,
star striker barely plays at PSG, but they got the money for it. So do we see them make a splash or a Portuguese splash in January with some of that money to make a run at the Europa League is going to be kind of interesting.
Yep. So in the process of kind of rebuilding, either through their youth system or whatever, they're still able to stay in the European competition and make it to Europa. That's definitely a positive result for them. Getting back to the slideshow here, we've got Group E.
Spain, man. Spain
another Spain winner.
Spain things. Atleti and Griezmann just can't be stopped. Like, I know we joke about, especially with Nick, I hate using this phrase for the connotations it has, but terrorist football, putting up a +11 goal differential. Like, I'm almost ready to take that away from Diego Simeone. Like, yes, Lazio.
Everything I read going into it was saying this Simeone like mindset's a little bit different. Like, it's not the same type of style.
Like, they will still get those blatant yellow cards up a goal to stop attacking play. Like, they still do a lot of that stuff that people really hate. But it's hard to ignore. 0 losses, a +11 goal differential. Again, not a super crazy group, but kudos to them. They had a match against Lazio at home. Griezmann scores early, and Griezmann does what Griezmann does. He's come out and said recently, like, I think I am the player to continue this progression for Atleti. I think a lot of people on the surface going into the year, thought, is he over the hump? Is he really able to take Atleti to the next level? But, you go 4 wins, 2 draws, 0 losses, plus 11 goal differential, and it's like, yeah, he had a great Champions League, and Atleti seems to be a little more offensive than we're kind of used to seeing for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Celtic did finally pick up a UCL group stage win. Took them a while, and they had to bring good old Brendan Rodgers back in, but they got it done finally. And I'm sure they will be back next year, at least potentially getting to the group stages. So we'll see. Maybe those Scottish diehards can get their they probably won't get their knockouts, but maybe they'll get a little bit closer next year. Maybe they'll get
first win,
first
win in what, 8 years, I think, in group stage. Granted, they haven't always made it to group stage because them and Rangers, one of them's got to go to the playoff. But yeah,
it's like they always play Feyenoord and PSV. Like the Scottish teams and those 2 Dutch teams are always playing to make
and the Dutch always seem to outdo them. But they got the better of the Dutch side this time. Feyenoord, it was a pretty meaningless game. So I don't want to read too much into it, like long term for either of these clubs. But hey, at least they won a group stage game for the first time in 5-6 years. So kudos to Celtic, I suppose. You don't like the monarchy.
Arnie Slot, I hope it was worth it. I hope it was worth it, Arnie Slot. No, just kidding. So, yeah, that's pretty much all we've had to say for Group E the whole time, honestly, because next comes Group F, and that's always been the one that we, especially Dylan, wants to talk about. It was everything we thought it would be. Besides Dortmund finishing first, nobody thought that. But yeah, Dortmund, PSG, Milan, and then Newcastle bounces out of Europe. Dylan.
So I'm not.
You beat PSG 4-1.
Yeah.
You're sitting there.
We go to San Siro and we get a draw. Then we beat PSG 4-1 at home. Like I pulled up the Opta analysis for the going into the final match day of odds of advancing or whatever. We had a better chance of advancing to Champions League than we did not making Europa League. But I think that in a microcosm is not a fair representation of how truly heartbreaking this Champions League run was for us, purely because of how we started. I mean, it was a perfect start. I mean, you don't expect to go into Milan and get 3 points. You're hoping for a draw at best. PSG at home, honestly, I was hoping for a draw at best purely because of Mbappe and Hakimi. Like a 4-1 win, I'm like, oh, we're golden. Like I haven't gone back and watched. If you haven't,
people were asking if you could win the tournament after that game.
Those people are insane, because even pre-injury, thinking we could win the tournament,
y'all were healthy.
Even pre-injury crisis, and that's an understatement. I think that was a little bit extreme, but winning the group,
it kind of had a bit of a could
they? It did have a bit of a could they. But winning the group felt very, very possible, very realistic, very much a real possibility for us. And going from possibly winning the group through match day 2 or match week 2 to flaming out completely from European competition is heartbreaking. But it was always Pulisic, wasn't it? It was always Pulisic. It was always going to be Pulisic. Like, as soon as he scored, I'm like, why didn't I bet a Pulisic anytime goal score? Like, you just felt it. Like, not only
he was going to do it to you. He was going to do it to you.
Because of how we had been playing, but just me and the way my the way my last 2 weeks have gone as a sports fan have been absolutely miserable. So it's like, of course, there's going to be that tiny ounce of me that's like, yay, Pulisic scored a meaningful UCL goal. I want to be happy, but I just can't be. But going from 35 minutes in, we're in a UCL spot. Like, Dortmund was beating PSG, and we were beating AC Milan. The stars were aligning, and then Pulisic goal. Like, okay, all right, it is what it is. Like, going into match day, I was content. I had convinced myself, as bad as I wanted UCL, I was content with UEL. Like, I was fine with it. going into group stage, if that's what we got, I would have been happy.
Because you're still ahead of schedule.
Right. Oh, yes.
You're still ahead of schedule.
Incredibly ahead of schedule. So as soon as that Pulisic goal came, I tried to talk myself into it. I'm like, all right, so here we are. Like, we're probably should finish in Europa League. We shouldn't drop points at home against AC Milan because we have that, cauldron effect of St. James's Park, which I could go on a whole rant about how quiet the building went after giving up that goal, which is embarrassing because it was barely into the first half. I don't know why our fans seem to give up, but that's a whole nother topic. And then
they were internally, you guys were all so nervous going into that.
Absolutely no doubt.
Nervy.
Absolutely no doubt. And then the Mbappe goal happens in like the 70, 75th minute of that game. So we're like, all right, well, we're definitely just playing for Europa League now. And then Shar goes on his little run, if you will, if you want to call it that, trying to be the hero again, because he got a lot of confidence after that PSG goal that put us up 4-1, and Chukwueze gets brought on for Musa. So I'm like, all right, honestly, this thought crossed my mind when that sub happened. I went, all right, at least it's not going to be an American. At least like Pulisic's out, Musa's out, like we're good. Like the Americans are off. Like, all right, I'm in a good mental state. And then 70 seconds later, Chukwueze goes ahead and scores, and it was really heartbreaking. You look at the Almiron blatant mischance. The guy is afraid of his right foot. If I've watched this on replay, probably an unhealthy amount of times. I should probably talk to my therapist about how much I've watched Almiron choosing to wait for the ball to get to his left foot and then have it taken off the goal line from him instead of just literally tapping it in. I'm convinced if you or I or anybody I play with on Sunday League had that same ball in.
That's why it looked so weird to me. I keep wondering why that replay looks so weird to me. I obviously don't know Miguel Almiron like you do. I didn't know he was so one-footed like that.
One-footed.
But it looked so weird. It looked so weird why he didn't attack that ball.
He like backs off of it to like angle his body to get his left foot on it. It's like it's almost like he's inviting pressure for a foul or something. That's what I originally thought. It wasn't looking for. It was nothing
because it's Miguel Almiron. So
yes. It was nothing but looking to get it on his left foot. And like you could have toe poked that like a 7th grader with your right foot and got it in. You didn't even have you were so far on top of that goal line. You could have done literally anything with your right foot and that ball was going in the net. And he insisted on letting it get to his left foot. And there's been a whole lot of hate on Almiron for it, rightfully so. But at the end of the day, we were still in a position to make European football come the new year. I don't know if it was an Eddie Howe strategy
with Miguel Almiron as your winger, which is crazy, just in and of itself.
I don't know if it was like an Eddie tactic about really pushing forward, trying to make Champions League. If it wasn't Eddie tactic, I go, hey man, we're here. We're somewhat lucky to be here. Like you said earlier, and I've said time and time again, we're ahead of schedule. So let's try and build on it while we can. But Cher taking the ball so far forward, losing it, leading to that second goal, will haunt me for many a days until I hear the Champions League anthem and Jacob Murphy with his stupid ass grin. Well, hopefully not Jacob Murphy. Please, dear God, please not Jacob Murphy. But somebody with their stupid ass grin during the Champions League song, it's not going to leave my head. But yeah, I mean, everything was there. XGs, I know you hate XGs, but XG, both Dortmund and Newcastle had far and away better XG. But that just goes to show XG ain't everything. You got to have guys that finish. And I've made that joke on Man United about how great their XG is. Or sorry, not Man United, Chelsea. I get confused with the teams I like to make fun of. I've made fun of Chelsea for that with how great their XG
that are easy to make fun of.
For how much I make fun of them for how great their XG is and their inability to convert on it. And it came to bite us. And it hurts. But at the end of the day, we are, like you said, I keep trying to remind myself, we're ahead of schedule. It's one less competition. We can try and go all in on Carabao and FA and, qualifying for probably not 4th spot now. Hopefully the rest of England
That's fine. Take a 1-year break from Champions League. It's okay. It doesn't kill you, I promise.
It shouldn't. It really shouldn't for me because of where we came from. But it hurts, especially the way it happened. It's painful, but it is what it is, and we move on and power forward, and hopefully we can at least finish in a. Honestly, I just hope we can finish in a conference league position at this point. I just want some sort of European football next year to learn and continue learning that multi-fixture a week schedule, because it is so damning, and the injuries are certainly part of it. But yeah, it hurts. It hurts.
It did end up being as tight a group as was advertised. The goal differential among the four was the lowest in the competition. The winner had +3. And then Milan was last, who actually finished third at -3. So it was tightly contested, although Milan took 3 matches to score. But I think Dortmund really, the lead's going to be buried here. Dortmund winning the group is very unexpected.
I think most people, including us, I think I took Dortmund third, possibly. No, I think actually I took Dortmund fourth.
I think I
think I had Newcastle third, Dortmund fourth, and they turn around and win the group. I think a big story here, not only Dortmund winning, is the inability for PSG to take chances. I think if you go back and really look, especially that Newcastle game that they ended up drawing, wrongfully so, but ended up drawing. I mean, there are many games in this group stage that they should have had 3 or 4 goals, and they just didn't convert. So I think that could be kind of a problem going forward. And while they are undoubtedly an incredibly scary unseeded or pot 2 team, I don't think they're an unbeatable pot 2 team by any means. Like, if Sociedad gets them, I see no reason why Sociedad can't advance out of it. So it's kind of not that PSG what we've been used to, because they're just not converting on those chances.
We'll talk about that in our knockouts, but just to play devil's advocate, I will ask you, why are you so scared of PSG? What have they done?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like,
we keep saying they're scary, but
that's what I'm saying. Like,
I mean, Mbappe's scary, but is PSG scary?
As a whole is like, they're probably the second scariest unseeded team, but like, are they really that scary? Like, I would argue Inter would be. I would be more scared if my team had to go play Inter right now than PSG, because they're just not converting. But on the flip side, PSG's had a whole lot of chances. Eventually, they're going to convert. Eventually, they're going to bring in guys that convert if the guys they currently have don't convert. So there is a little worry there for teams that do draw them, but by no means are they like an unbeatable pot 2 team like you would normally think of as PSG finishing second.
I think if the draw is rigged, I could see them wanting to get a big time matchup in that first weekend, pairing PSG with a Barcelona or something.
Barcelona needs to win this thing. I'm not scared of PSG, but I was so high on Barcelona after week 2. They cannot draw PSG, because that would scare me on my predictions a little bit. I'd still back Barcelona, but
if you're still worrying about your predictions, then that's very you. Like, you're a big gambler guy, so I could see. I've forgotten what my predictions are.
I will say I hit a 6-leg group winner parlay. I got 6 out of the 8 group winners right, and
wow.
I mean, some of them were chalk, like Bayern, who wasn't getting Bayern right, or Real Madrid. But I was Arsenal. Pretty proud of myself. I should start posting those again, because it felt pretty good.
Yeah, the easy ones. Let's just run through them right now. Is the City group, the Madrid group, and the Barcelona group. Even with most of these, we knew what probably 1-2 was going to be, with the exception of H. You thought maybe being a hipster Shakhtar. They weren't too far off from finishing second.
A run last match day. They gave it a little bit of a run, but Porto at the end, I think most people going into match day 6 would have predicted Porto to advance, especially playing at home.
Yeah. And there was an ocean away from 2 and 3 and the other 2 groups G and Group C. I didn't even notice that we put Group C back here when we went through it, to be honest. But Real Madrid, Napoli advancing out of Group C, as everyone predicted. City and Leipzig out of Group G, and then Barcelona and Porto, Portuguese represented once again in the knockout stages. with them advancing out of Group H. So we have our last 16. A lot of familiar faces, as there always is, because it's just always going to be that way. Dylan, final wrap-up thoughts on the group stage, your first group stage experience as a fan. I think next year you'll be able to watch it without your team in it. I'm going to go ahead and say that now.
So I don't want to say this because I said it once already, and I feel like dirty saying it. But as like a general fan, it'll be kind of nice not watching us. Like obviously,
you're able to watch so many more games.
As a Newcastle
so
fan, like obviously, I want us to be playing in the creme de la creme of the competition. But like it's stressful. Like match days aren't fun. Like even watching those for me 12:45, for you 11:45, for our European audience, whatever the heck time it is, the early
6 hours
early
ahead
matches, like isn't even fun. Like there's 2 matches on, I can't focus on them. I'm just refreshing for lineups. I'm like looking at analysis. Like it is way
checking that injury rumor. Like, please tell me he's playing.
Like it is, obviously, as an actual fan living in Europe, you always want your team in the Champions. I mean, I always want my team in Champions League, but it is way more fun having them in Champions League. The away days, the vibe around the city on home matches. So obviously, it is a little skewed being an American, but again, we're an American podcast, and that's kind of what we're here for. And at the end of the day, I want Newcastle in it, but not having Newcastle in it will make the round of 16 arguably more enjoyable because I'll just be able to kick my feet up and watch it. But at the same time,
hold on. Sorry, I want to say something real fast before I forget it. You mentioned something that I want to kind of just briefly touch on and then move away from it. You mentioned the feel around the city on match days, and you're speaking about Newcastle while you're in Detroit. And I want to tell the people watching, that's not crazy. Like when you ingrain yourself in, like, we have friends, people we call friends in this fan bases locally. You can feel the buzz. You really it's palpable. And that's not like a joke or something that's cheesy. Like it's legit, and that's like the culture over there. And that's one of the things that we both love so much
and
about
seeing like people's Snapchat stories or Instagram stories or Twitter videos. Like you feel like you're there. Like I the first match day, even the away day, like I got goosebumps watching pubs in Newcastle. The vibe around the Milan match, like, and that's something I absolutely will miss. But as like a non-objective or unaffiliated,
it's the same. It's not the same, but you feel that Premier League also. Like you can just.
It's not quite the same, but the match day feel I will.
It's not at all, but you still feel it.
As like a podcast host or a journalist, as you called us earlier off air, I will be a little bit.
We have to stick to those journalistic principles sometimes.
Relieved at times not having to watch Newcastle in the round of 16 and likely not next year. But kind of final thoughts, shout outs, predictions, whatever. I will give a shout out to our boys, Royal Antwerp. Didn't quite get to use their name as much as we had hoped when we had the draw show. I don't think either of us thought we would get to use their name as much as we thought we would want to, but Antwerp is fun. So I'm going to say Antwerp one more time. Beat Barcelona for their first Champions League win in club history on match day 6. It was meaningless for Barcelona. It meant nothing. But for a side like Antwerp, a smaller European side, a Belgian side, that at the end of the day, that's a massive victory. We already gave Celtic a shout out for finally winning a Champions League match. So shout out to them as well. And then kind of my mind somewhat transitions then to, as a Newcastle fan, probably not finishing top 4. How much did Newcastle and Manchester United let down the rest of England when it comes to the coefficient? Because in case you hadn't heard, which if you're listening to this, I'm sure you probably have already, coefficient is going to play a big factor into the extra 2 teams that make it. Right now, England, Germany, Italy, and Spain get 4. The top 2 will get a 5th team admitted into the Champions League next year under the new format. And right now, England is sitting over a whole coefficient point. Don't ask me to break down the math, but over a whole coefficient point behind second place Italy. And Italy is, for reference, only like 0.2 points behind first place. And Spain also had all 4 of their teams advance out of the Champions League. So I think it is probably an uphill battle for England to see 5 teams. Kind of goes against the English Premier League superiority complex that we all seem to have.
Well, no, because we have been admitted that like European competitions
They're different,
aren't suited to the European teams. However, I will say I have nothing like to back this up, but my gut tells me it's a lot like March Madness. You don't want to lose your champion in the first round. I feel like you're going to get a lot more coefficients for winning those things. So Brighton, go do the thing. Liverpool, go do the thing. Probably City, because I really hope it's not Arsenal, because I will cry if Arsenal wins the Champions League.
I'll agree with that. But as from a coefficient standpoint,
I have no idea.
From a coefficient standpoint, we're looking at all 4 Spanish teams are, I believe, seeded teams. I don't believe there's a Spanish team that's not seeded. So all Spanish teams who are currently sitting in 4th as a coefficient rating, just slightly behind England, will have advantageous matchups in the knockout stage. So there is a very, very strong chance that Spain sees more teams advance out of the round of 16 than England. They have double the chances, essentially, and all 4 are in the same pot as the English teams. So I do think there's a really, really strong chance that City, I think we can all agree, City isn't the City of the last 2 years. So I don't think City winning the Champions League like we saw at the beginning of the year is like a foregone conclusion.
We also said that last year, though.
We did
like around this time in the Premier League.
We did. So it will be.
I think you need to be rooting. We both need to be rooting hard for Bayern not to win the Champions League, and for Inter, you need to stop rooting for Inter right now.
Yeah. That's really tough. I don't want to stop rooting for Inter. It is really tough. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly rooting against Lazio. I'm certainly rooting against AC Milan. I hope Inter doesn't draw an English team. I hope they draw a German team or a Spanish team and can knock them out. That's kind of my like saving grace right now to continue rooting for Inter. But from a coefficient standpoint, it is going to be super interesting. That's kind of an extra wrinkle. It almost feels like college football in a way, where even if your team isn't in it necessarily, you're like, all right, I'm rooting for my conference or my league, even more so than we saw in the past. Because before, coefficient rating just got you four teams in, and England was always going to get 4 teams in. But now getting that 5th team, I think will kind of create a sense of unity in a weird way. Like, throw this out there: Arsenal's in the Champions League final. Spurs are sitting in 5th.
No.
You would. This is a genuinely.
The answer
question.
Is no.
You would rather.
The answer is no.
All right. Like
Yes. Yes. That would be an interesting question to ask, like Spurs fans, and I think I know what the answer would be. But I would sacrifice 1 year of not being in the Champions League to not have Arsenal be European champions. Right.
I mean, if you put the shoe on the other foot, and it'll never happen because they're terrible.
Well, y'all haven't
threw the shoe on the other foot and asked me about Sunderland. Like, yeah, I'm probably agreeing. I would rather not see Sunderland win Europe. So, like, for me, it's a little hard because our biggest rival is in the championship and sitting in 7th place, 6th place, whatever. So it is a little bit tough for me to like wrap my mind around it. But I'd be hard pressed to not.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting here with like arguably the currently most hated rivalry in the country.
Saying. Like it would be tough. Yeah. Like it's really tough for me to say I wouldn't want Sunderland to get.
Yeah, the answer is no. The answer is no. I do not want Arsenal to win.
But it is going to be a kind of an interesting wrinkle on it. Like a lot of European fans, maybe not Spurs specifically, but a lot of European fans are sick of City. Or I'm sorry, a lot of English fans are sick of City. Yeah. So if City wins or your team, insert X team here, like it would be a kind of an interesting complex that I think this could bring about, like the Mizzou fans rooting for Alabama in the championship, so Mizzou Athletics gets more money, or Michigan fans rooting.
Well, I think City's kind of at that Alabama point where it's like we're just numb to the winning. Like they're going to win again.
I
3 years in, you're sick of it.
Like if Auburn could win the championship, would Alabama be rooting for them because it helps them? Like I think that's more of a fair argument. But end of the day, very interesting wrinkle that the new system brings afoot, and
We got to have somebody explain the coefficient to us
math,
to better understand it. So we'll get Nick on at some point
from the intranet. But I by no means understand how it is calculated.
It's good for that.
I do know for a fact that in the past, and still determining the teams that get 4 bids is over a 3-year period of coefficient. But for the extra 2 teams, it is a 1-year coefficient. So it is different.
England's never in danger of losing that 4 teams, so you don't worry about that.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Like in the past, English clubs were not rooting for other English clubs because they thought it would help them. England was always going to get 4. But now that it's like, oh, could we get a 5th? It's like, do you root for that English club that you might typically root against? Like Newcastle has come to very much dislike Arsenal. Like if we're sitting in 5th, do we want Arsenal to win the Champions League? Like, probably, maybe. Like I don't know. Like it brings that weird wrinkle into it. But it's a lot. You
at least have to ask the question,
which
is weird.
A lot of things I hate about the new Champions League format, but that is one thing I think could bring a little bit of extra fun into the competition.
Yeah. Dylan and I are going to sign off, take a break, and then we'll be back recording later tonight. But we will talk to y'all in this one, and then later on, probably a day later in the next one. We appreciate y'all listening. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, share. I can hear myself in the background. That's why I'm talking kind of funny. Y'all have a good night. Be safe. Peace out.